So those of you paying attention realize that there have been some developments in SpyGate. Developments that the media, of course, is not paying attention to and are using the current crisis in order to avoid talking about. The footnotes of the Inspector General's report has been declassified to a large extent, and it has provided some doozies for insights. Now, those of you who are unfamiliar with what SpyGate is, it's the FBI's targeting and spying on the Trump campaign during the 2016 election and sending spies into the campaign based off of unverified political dirt paid for by the Democrats who went to foreign sources of information. And yeah, it kind of really looks bad when you're using the Democrats' paid for information to investigate their political opponents. But okay, they tried to pass off for years that this was all evidence-based, this was all justified, and that Trump had colluded with Russia. But now we're finding out the exact opposite was true, that it was the Democrats that had colluded with Russia. Now, I did try reaching out to several Democrats and the DNC, who pushed for years that Trump had colluded with Russia, and therefore the investigation for Robert Mueller and the House was perfectly justified. And so I reached out for them. Unfortunately, this was the only response that I got.
We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
That wasn't exactly a very encouraging response, but let's go ahead and take a look at what the media is trying to say in order to downplay the footnotes, and then we'll go off and show you what the footnotes actually are. So CNN, in writing about this, tries to downplay it, saying, oh, it just found some mistakes. And goes, the Republicans, even the president, have grasped onto those page missteps as they continue to criticize the FBI's handling of the early Russia investigation and attempts to undercut findings in criminal cases opened by former special counsel Robert Mueller. Okay, now what they're not telling you is outside of a taxi medallion and outside of tax evasion, the cases brought by special counsel Robert Mueller have fallen apart in court. In fact, they've been tossed out and laughed out of court because they had absolutely nothing on them, right? They were just going out and making headlines by announcing indictments, but a lot of the indictments, they never actually expected anybody to show up in court to defend themselves, so the indictments would go unchallenged. And therefore, they would just have the headlines. But once the challenge or the indictment was answered and people showed up in court, well, the Robert Mueller's case fell apart. Why? Because it was a complete joke. Now, this next part gets hilarious. Those errors included wrong dates, incorrectly identified sources of information, FBI determinations that were asserted as facts, mistakes in direct quotations, and best of all, facts that lacked supporting documents or differed from what supporting documents said. And none of these were material errors. Okay, let me get this straight. You're asserting things as facts without supporting documents, or you're asserting things as facts that are in direct contradiction to what your evidence and documentation says, which makes you wonder, what exactly are they considering to be facts here? Valid question. If these are facts, but the body of evidence directly contradicts the facts, how are your assertions facts? And the misquotations. Yeah, there's quite a bit of a difference between someone saying, I did not rob a bank, and you being quoted as, I robbed a bank. All right, that kind of changes things just a little bit, especially if you're using these quotations and such as part of your FISA application and, the warrant process. Yeah. See, the FBI has been caught doctoring and altering evidence in order to get the FISA warrants and withholding from the courts exculpatory evidence that proves that their case is BS. Now, it goes on and we get more information here regarding what the FBI did. So, this coming from Fox News, Trump aide denied campaign rigging in pre-election conversation with FBI secret source, according to the transcripts. A transcript about a 4-hour-long conversation between Papadopoulos and a confidential human source for the FBI on October 31st, 2016. And accordingly, the confidential source had asked George Papadopoulos whether he thought Russia hacked the Democratic National Committee ahead of the Democrat National Convention. Papadopoulos replies, no. The comments were made by Papadopoulos are noteworthy because, according to officials, they were never provided or included in the evidence to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Geez, what a shocker. When seeking warrants to surveil another Trump campaign aide, Carter Page, over suspicions of Trump campaign ties to Russia. When asked whether he thought the Russians had special interest in the election, Papadopoulos replied, that's all bullshit. I'm trying to keep this clean. No one knows who's hacking them, he added. It could be the Chinese, it could be the Iranians, it could be some Bernie supporters, could be anonymous. If you're not familiar with the hacker group called Anonymous, Papadopoulos was then asked whether he thought Russians have an interest in Trump. Dude, no one knows how a president is going to govern anyways. You don't just say, oh, like he said before being cut off, I don't know. Even Putin said it himself. It's all like a conspiracy theory. So he's going off and saying, well, how can Russians have an interest in President Trump getting elected when nobody knows how Trump will govern? But it goes on to say, the source went on to press Papadopoulos, saying, I feel like there's some heavy Trump supporters out there that kind of want to rig this effing election in Trump's favor. And then at the same time, I don't know. Papadopoulos quipped, dude, there is no rigging in his favor. The source pushed him once again on whether he thought Trump campaign had anything to do with the hacking of the DNC. No, and I know that for a fact, he said. I've been working with them for the last 9 months. That and all of this stuff has been happening, in the last 4 months? Papadopoulos in the conversation recalled someone asking him the same question earlier in the year. He asked me the same question. And so this goes on and on like this for quite some time. You can figure it out and read the rest of it. But basically, they had a 4-hour-long conversation in which George Papadopoulos was saying, no, I don't believe this. I have no information or knowledge that any of this is happening and all of that. Now, remind you that this is long after the meeting in the London bar with Alexander Downer, where he said Russia had a trove of Clinton emails. Of course, that by the time he actually said that, if that was what he actually said, was already public opinion. All right, think about that. Already public opinion, because Forbes magazine wrote an opinion article months earlier talking about Russia having Clinton's emails and how he would plan to use them. So even if he had made those statements at a London bar, it was probably because he had already read it or heard other people talking about it and was just going, woohoo, yeah. Now, as far as it goes, there is some information here that has come out in the footnotes of the Inspector General's report that was declassified. And it's important now that we've taken a look at how CNN and the left is trying to downplay it, how the spies that were sent into the Trump campaign came up empty. So you start wondering, well, what were they using to justify continuing this investigation? What was the predicate for opening up the counterintelligence investigation or to continue on to the Mueller investigation? And we'll get back to Mueller in just a moment. But as it's being reported by the Daily Caller and a lot of other sites, the FBI knew the Steel Dossier contained Russian disinformation 3 years ago, Somehow it never leaked. Isn't that amazing? When it's about Trump, every rumor leaks. But when it comes to the FBI spying on political opponents for a Democrat administration using only Democrat sources of evidence, it never leaks, even when they realize that they were investigating fake information. So at some point in 2017, the precise month is not clear, the FBI obtained evidence that Russian operatives fed disinformation to former British spy Christopher Steele. For years, the public was fed a healthy diet of leaks, innuendos, and false information to imply that President Trump and his campaign were part of a Russian conspiracy to spread disinformation. They said in a statement upon the release of 3 footnotes from the Justice Department's Inspector General report. Now, what it goes on to say here in the footnotes is that the FBI knew that Steel Dossier that they were using as a predicate for their spying operation was actually filled with Russian disinformation, and that the dossier was the Russian attempt to interfere and meddle in the 2016 election. And when you go through and you take a look at it and analyze what the truth is, and here's what some of that, footnotes, although still partially redacted, looks like. But when you go through, you realize that, hey, it was actually the Clintons and the Democrats and even the FBI that was colluding with Russia in order to try and influence the outcome of the 2016 election. After all, they were being fed Russian disinformation that, by the way, they paid for that Russian disinformation. And even after, if they didn't know in the beginning that it was Russian disinformation, even after they had figured it out that it was Russian disinformation, they still tried to use it to spy on Trump in order to also try and get Trump removed after the election. And considering that they knew this before it was passed off to the Mueller investigation, it makes you wonder, what the hell was Mueller investigating? It probably didn't take him very long to figure out that this was all a hoax and that it was based off of Russian disinformation. But the left didn't seem to care that they were the ones, whether knowingly or as useful idiots, were the ones who were actually advancing Russia's interests, and trying to help Russia in their campaign to interfere with and meddle in our election. They didn't seem to care. They went along with it because, orange man bad. Now, as we go through here and we take a look at everything else that is going on, the Attorney General Barr has stated that Durham, who is investigating the origins of the spying operation, is not looking to just produce a report. He's out there trying to put together a criminal case against the people who were engaged in the spying operation. Now, this is really scary stuff that we have figured out here, how corrupt the government has become and was under the Obama administration, and just how much it has been used to try and influence the outcome of elections. So it's not just the left-wing media that is dishonest and corrupt. It's not just the Democrats and the DNC, but they have spread this corruption throughout government. And you wonder why it's so hard during this current crisis to trust government, to trust the Democrats in areas in which the Democrats are in control and issuing these stay-at-home orders and all these other authoritarian actions that actually appear to exceed their actual authority. This is scary stuff here, and we need to really demand a lot more transparency. We need even more information. But what we really need, of course, is for those who were involved in this illegal spying operation to actually face justice, that they are not above the law, and that if they engage in criminal behavior, then just like everybody else, just like you, just like me, they will face the consequences of their actions. Instead, what have we seen so far? They get held up as heroes on the left, get a golden parachute, a lot of book deals, and several $1 million. And of course, whether it's trying to look into SpyGate or whether it's trying to look into trying to get accurate information regarding the current crisis, if you try to go off and analyze what the left is saying, what their actions are, when you start asking questions, the only response you're really going to get from the left is,
"We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile."
I say resistance is not futile.